Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Cutter One. I am your host, Jay Just Jay, your resident troublemaker and your resident culture warrior. Hope you're all doing awesome. All right, guys. This one I'm kind of putting into the, I don't know, funny, goofy, lighthearted category. Not taking it too seriously, but, we'll see. Anyway, good folks over at CBR.com. Is Lord of the Rings pipeweed actually Middle Earth's marijuana? The Lord of the Rings makes no attempt to conceal the Hobbit's love of smoking, but is their pipeweed actually Middle Earth's version of cannabis? By Jeanette White. All right, let's see what Jeanette has to say. Fans of J.R.R. Tolkien's epic trilogy know that hobbits, and Gandalf, love to smoke pipeweed. Of course, director Peter Jackson made sure to include the halfling's love of smoking in his The Lord of the Rings films. However, his interpretation left audiences joking and wondering whether pipeweed is actually Middle-earth's version of marijuana. While the idea of pipeweed being marijuana may seem silly, it isn't that far fetched. After all, hobbits are a peaceful race known for enjoying their gardens. Along with their green thumbs, their elaborate eating schedule of 7 meals a day, which famously includes second breakfast, 11sies, and afternoon tea, suggests that they may have a bad case of the munchies. However, as funny as marijuana in Middle-earth sounds, Tolkien confirms that pipeweed is tobacco, not cannabis. Still, the Lord of the Rings text leaves a little wiggle room for interpretation. Tolkien compared the Hobbit's beloved weed to tobacco, not cannabis. That is correct. In The Lord of the Rings appendices, Tolkien details the hobbits' love of pipeweed, stating, quote, "They imbibed or inhaled, through pipes of clay or wood, the smoke of the burning leaves of a herb, which they called pipeweed or leaf, a variety probably of nicotiana." Nicotiana, or nicotiana, of course, is a genus of plants that includes tobacco. Tolkien himself was an avid tobacco user and particularly enjoyed smoking his pipe. While Tolkien's own habit was likely an inspiration for the Hobbit's beloved herb, this quote also creates room for interpretation by saying, quote, "a variety probably of nicotiana." The probably suggests pipeweed could be another type of herb, like marijuana. And if you're wondering why I'm saying herb funny like that, is because seeing it reminds me of an Eddie Izzard skit where he was talking about the difference between British and American peoples. And, like Americans, we will say aluminum. In England, they say aluminium. And he said, and in America, you say herb, but in England, we say herb because there's a fucking H in it. Anyway, I digress. Like marijuana, Jackson's film adaptation clearly hints as much, with Saruman condemning Gandalf's smoking by saying, quote, "Your love of the halfling's leaf has clearly slowed your mind," unquote. The Return of the King movie also includes a scene of Merry and Pippin puffing on pipeweed with crescent eyes while eating and giggling. Although Tolkien's use and stance on marijuana use haven't been confirmed, Jackson went with a playful interpretation of pipeweed nonetheless, though his viewpoint makes sense. Gandalf recommended pipeweed's mind-altering effects. In Unfinished Tales, a collection of stories and notes published by Tolkien's son, Christopher, Gandalf's description of pipeweed suggests the herb produces mind-altering effects and euphoria. Following criticism from Saruman, Gandalf replies, quote, "If you use this herb yourself, you might find that smoke blown out cleared your mind of shadows within. Anyway, it gives patience to listen to error without anger, but it is not one of my toys. It is an art of the little people away in the West," unquote. Although tobacco could produce a mind-clearing quality for some, many attribute that sensation to marijuana use. While the Lord of the Rings novels blatantly compares pipeweed to tobacco, one could argue the text hints at a sneaky marijuana metaphor, too. Metaphor. To Jackson, metaphor too, damn it. Jackson seemed to think so, and so do many fans. As noted by Leafly, cannabis breeders have gone on to use alternate names for pipeweed like Long Bottom Leaf, Old Toby, and Southern Star for their strands. So, no matter whether Gandalf is actually the stoner that Sauron seems to think he is, pipeweed remains an iconic part of the Lord of the Rings universe and the cannabis community. Okay, so that's Janet White's take on it. Let's discuss. Okay. All right, I'm just going to be completely transparent here. Yes, in as a teenager growing up in the Bronx, and partially as a young adult in my college years, I too partook of the devil's cabbage, if you will. I smoked weed. Not regularly. It was never my thing. I don't know. I was one of those weird people. Like, I don't know. It tended to make me nauseous, but that's a completely different conversation. Not what we're talking about here. Well, I mean, it is. You guys know what I mean. Anyway, so I could kind of see initially. Yes, I remember reading this and thinking, is this pipe weed they're smoking? Is this like some are the hobbits rolling spliffs in their spare time? Like what's going on here? But then as they mentioned, it is clearly stated that it was meant to be tobacco esque, right? It was the Middle Earth equivalent of tobacco, right? Now, as a person in their late 20s and throughout my 30s and stuff like that, I was involved with a lot of historical associations, and I would work a lot of historical events, particularly that were focused around like the World War II era. I would be involved with a lot of museums that would put on like sort of like these weekend showcases where you would have like it would be like themed around things like the Battle of the Bulge and stuff like that. And one of the things I wound up doing was I wound up smoking a pipe, like grandpa's pipe, right? And actually smoking it. I would go out and I would buy like the flavored tobacco, like like the black cherry tobacco, and I would smoke a pipe. And I could see how it is. Tolkien did the same thing. I would smoke a pipe the same way Tolkien smoked a pipe, and I could see how it is a very relaxing, calming thing. Like now, obviously, it's not good for you. It's not healthy for you, and I'm not advocating anybody take up tobacco as a habit or something to do. But it can be. There is something to be said as a former smoker. I no longer smoke anymore. Not cigarettes or anything. As a former smoker, I can say that there is some truth to the fact is that it does relax you, like even just tobacco, right? It does sort of take the edge off of your nerves. That's why you see people who are in high stress situations light up a cigarette, right? So there's something to be said for that. So I think the whole idea of is Middle Earth pipe weed kind of like a marijuana type substance. No, I think that's, again, modern sensibilities, people wanting it to be something cool like that, especially when you're a teenager or in your, like, a young adult. And that's what's in your day-to-day life. You either partake of it yourself or you have friends that do or whatever, or it's just part of your social environment. You want to sort of project that onto Tolkien's work, in regards to pipeweed, because it makes it, it's sort of like another connection between you and Middle Earth, right? And so I don't see anything necessarily wrong with wanting that to be the case. I mean, you have to admit, like Janet White does in this article, that no, Tolkien does explicitly say it's more like a nicotine-based tobacco plant. It is not like marijuana. So any interpretation of it being like marijuana is the person making the interpretation sort of projecting, okay? Because Tolkien has specified that it is more of a tobacco like plant that they're smoking. So I it's one of those things where I'm like, you know what? I'm not like a douche. Like I understand, like when I was in my 20s and you would have asked me, "Hey, do you think you know, pipe weed is like weed, and I probably would have said, I don't know, I hope so, because that, that would, would explain why the Hobbit spend so much time with it, right? But it is what it is. Like, again, it's not a harmful article. I just think it's one of those more like, if you as an individual want to interpret it that way, that's fine, because it's really sort of a secondary, non-important thing when it comes to the overall story and narrative of what's going on in Tolkien's work. So, but yeah, I just thought it was an interesting article. Let me know what you think. Do you think that it, like they say, that there's enough circumstantial evidence that it could be interpreted as pipeweed is to the hobbits what marijuana is to us in modern day real world, i.e. a sort of drug with, narcotic effects, right? Or do you think it's like, obviously, what Tolkien sort of said, which is more like a version of tobacco? Okay. And if so, would you want it to have been a sort of marijuana-like plant that they're smoking, as opposed to a regular tobacco plant? How would that have changed the story? Probably because Frodo and them would have just like forgot that they even had the ring and never left the house. Like, Gandalf would come back 17 years later and it'd just still be like Frodo and Sam sitting there on the couch, like, "Oh, hey, Gandalf, what's up?" But yeah, so let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Again, I just thought it was a kind of funny article, one of those ones that doesn't piss you off. You're kind of like, okay, yeah, I get it, haha. But yeah, all right, that's all I got for this one. So if you like the video, then like the video. If you feel like sharing the video, by all means do so. It gets it out there, it gets it seen, it helps us with the algorithm. And, that's always a plus. If you have not subscribed yet, I would hope that you would consider subscribing to the channel and joining the army of beautiful badasses, right? Because that's what we are. And if you have subscribed, thank you, as always, from the bottom of my heart for joining the fight to protect the professor and his works, and to uphold the integrity and fandom of all things fantasy and high fantasy, and continuing to give us a place to escape and smoke pipeweed and have 7 meals a day. So anyway, yeah, that's all I got for right now. Remember to always be good, be awesome, be safe, but more importantly than anything else, stay more dorkish. Peace.